This is an incredibly important issue, and there's a nice coincidence of timing. Art was in my office just a couple weeks ago, and we were catching up and talking about issues and ways that we could work together to benefit our shared districts of Abington and Cheltenham and the other areas that we share. And so we talked about a number of issues that we both care about and feel very strongly. And one of them happens to be the importance of raising the minimum wage. Art, to his credit, has really gone in and spearheaded the effort at the state legislative level to raise the minimum wage, which sadly and somewhat shamefully has not been raised in a very long period of time. And it just so happens that in terms of the timing, this past week, myself and a group of other congressional Democrats introduced legislation that would also raise the federal minimum wage. So let me just briefly go through why this is important. Depending on the measure of inflation you use, the minimum wage is at its lowest level in either 60 years or over 70 years. Either way, that is bad. It means that you have a number, in fact millions, of working Americans, folks working full-time, who nonetheless are living in poverty. That is wrong. Anyone who works full-time in America should not be living in poverty, period. The minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25 an hour at the national level. The last time it was raised was legislation in 2007. And Pennsylvania, in our state, has not followed the leadership or exercised the leadership that so many other states around us have done. Just last year, 2014, you had 13 states vote to raise their minimum wage. Almost all of the states that border Pennsylvania have a higher minimum wage. Pennsylvania, unfortunately, still does not. I want to, and if you notice, we're at a food pantry. We're not among workers. And this is a connection, and Art, to his credit, this was his idea, and I want to give him credit because it's such an important point of this debate that often isn't made. So many of those who are working at a minimum wage job are still receiving government assistance. That's right. And need food pantries such as the Interfaith Food Pantry. That is a part of the debate that often is missed out. Consider that in Pennsylvania, there are 1,481,000 workers who make the minimum wage. The vast majority of those making the minimum wage are female workers. Overwhelming majority, about 2/3. So it's important that when we talk about minimum wage workers, we recognize that these are folks who are still receiving government assistance because their wages are so low, and folks that are still relying upon the nonprofit sector to supplement their wages. If you think about it, what essentially we are doing is that the taxpayers are supplementing big businesses for not paying their workers a fair wage and a living wage, and so we, the taxpayers, are having to make up the difference. Right. That is wrong. So Art and Senator Haywood and a number of our colleagues in both the State House and the State Senate have legislation at the state level that would exercise the lead. The way to do this for all states is to raise it at the federal level. I have co-sponsored the legislation we introduced last week that would raise the minimum wage ultimately to $12 an hour by the year 2010, or excuse me, by the year 2020. I wish that would have happened by 2010, but can't turn back the clock. Let's make sure we do this and do this now. And one final point on this I want to highlight before turning it back over to Art and the further speakers. You know, this is really a statement of values, what kind of country we are. Do we reward work, or do we instead say that you're going to work a 40-hour week but still be left in poverty? And for the children of those who are being raised, I talked about the 1.4 million Pennsylvanians who right now work at minimum wage. I just want to point out, I should have earlier, in Pennsylvania there are 254,000 single mothers at minimum wage jobs. So that's 250,000 single moms. I can tell you with a 16-month-old, it's hard enough to be a parent in a two-parent household where one of the parents works, but to be a single parent and to work and to be working at a minimum wage job is just deeply unfair. And this really will be the final point, I promise. By the way, when I say finally, that in no way means I'm actually close to being done. I just want it's really just to give people false hope. The final point I'll say, for those who say, well, you know, we should raise the minimum wage, but I'm really concerned it'll lead to an increase in unemployment. Take a look at the 13 states that raised the minimum wage last year. 12 of the 13 have unemployment rates better than the national average. 12 of the 13. So don't buy that argument that there is a relationship between increasing unemployment and raising minimum wage. So with that, I will very proudly hand it over to new state senator who's doing an absolute job, this kind of person who should be in public service, Haywood.